Good morning. My name is Gwyneth Griffin, and today I will be addressing the pervasive social problem that is rampant overconsumption, especially as it relates to the fast fashion industry. This industry has created a devastating cycle of waste and pollution that impacts the entire globe. My thesis is the pervasive social problem of overconsumption, namely in the fast fashion industry, has created a devastating environmental cycle of waste and pollution. This demands a systemic shift in corporate frameworks, as well as a change in our culture of overconsumption. Over the course of this presentation, we will explore the mechanisms, both capitalistic and sociological, that drive this crisis, its environmental and human consequences, and the necessary shifts required for a sustainable future. To understand the problem, we must first define the mechanism, the fast fashion model. This model is retailer-driven, surviving on the lie that it is consumer-driven. Retailers like Zara and H&M exploit speed and exceptionally low prices. Historically, fast fashion operated on traditional seasons. Today, however, the cycle has been accelerated to include roughly 52 seasons annually. This acceleration, in turn, fuels hyperconsumption, with consumers buying 60% more clothes and wearing them for half as long. This is according to Bartlett, a journalist for National Geographic. This results in massive waste, with Americans alone discarding 68 pounds of textiles and clothing per person every year. I found the statistic in Liz Claudio's report. She's a professor of public health. This volume has overwhelmed donation and recycling centers. It's evident in the fact that we have enough clothes to clothe the next 6 generations. This was found in a BBC talk show, and they found this statistic by taking the amount of textile waste we have currently and dividing it by the amount of clothes each person would need each year. Despite what one may think, the true driver is not natural consumer demand, but instead the ideology of overconsumption. Western Marxist theorists argue that production drives consumption, contradicting the neoclassical economics myth of consumer sovereignty. This ideology normalizes environmentally destructive behaviors. It conceals the power dynamic by deflecting blame from the system, the growth-oriented capitalist economy, and instead places responsibility on consumers. As theorists note, the capitalist system transforms the individuals into a commodity which consumes, in order to perpetuate itself. Advertising is the primary tool used to promote excess consumption, and strategically manufactures false needs, which ultimately serve to increase the wealth for the ruling class. So why do people participate in the system? Consumption has become central to identity formation. As traditional forms of identity like place or stable occupations weaken, consumption fills that void by providing the primary tools for expressing ourselves, but also social status. Fast fashion's core appeal is its ability to democratize the honor and prestige that was once reserved for luxury goods by allowing consumers to stimulate wealth at a low cost. This need to convey wealth might not even look like what you might typically consider a luxury. It can look like a normal middle-class family purchasing goods to convey stability or wealth. The role of consumption in identity formation is deeply rooted in the psychological and cultural shifts in our modern society. This displacement of traditional identity structures is called the empty self, which seeks cohesion and fulfillment by being filled up, whether it's consumer products or celebrity culture. Consumption practices therefore provide meaning, purpose, and a way of constructing appropriate personal and social identities. This turns everyday purchases into decisions about fundamentally who to be. Fast fashion exploits this psychological need by enabling consumers to emulate prestige and honor. This constant quest for self-affirmation through goods is amplified by advertising and dictating the possession of the right clothes and the right accessories. For example, on this slide, I chose a picture of what was called Rush Talk. So this was really popular on TikTok, and it's basically just girls showing their outfits. It was almost inspirational for some people, and they chose to base all of their outfits off of these, and it's really just an example of how people will rush out to buy things to look like other people's and to curate an identity of, I am a rich girl, I am attending this college, and I look put together. So, in Samuel Schwab's paper, he argues that a reduction in consumption won't occur until society's collective honor code views this fast fashion and this need to have all of the right clothes and the right things as shameful and dishonorable rather than acceptable. While Shoaib argues that some people view overconsumption as acceptable and that must be changed, there are a good portion of people who understand that there is an ecological crisis, especially surrounding fast fashion. Despite the widespread knowledge of the ecological crisis, humanity suffers from a global bystander effect. Global bystander effect is a phenomenon where the world masses have accepted a collective paralysis to the escalating ecological crisis, despite having knowledge of the severity. This paralysis means we watch the slow destruction of the planet, a crime John Mills terms ecocide, without intervening. This inaction is driven by denial, apathy, and prioritizing immediate comforts. We are paralyzed with diffusion of responsibility, assuming that someone else will step in or I am just one person. Moreover, the complexity of the issue means that individuals feel that their action alone can do nothing in the grand scheme of things, leading citizens to defer responsibility to the government when in reality, we must all consciously agree and be motivators for change. The true cost of affordability is actually us externalizing the social and environmental costs. This is the uncomfortable secret of the fast fashion business model. The production phase is catastrophically polluting. High-income countries have much higher per capita consumption rates than low-income countries, yet it is low-income countries that bear the environmental impacts associated with manufacturing, distribution, and disposal of goods. The textile dyeing and treating process is a primary source of water pollution. According to The Dirty Side of the Garment Industry by Nikolay Angwalov, these processes expel tons of industrial-grade peroxide and bleach into open water basins. This has the harshest impact in countries with less regulations and protections, primarily where our clothing is made. This makes textile production arguably the most polluting sector that produces goods for mass consumption. Beyond processing, growing cotton is an energy-intensive process requiring significant pesticides. In the United States, the world's largest exporter of cotton, this crop accounts for a quarter of all pesticides used, according to the USDA. According to Waste Couture by Liz Claudio, the cotton grown in America is exported to China and other countries with low labor costs. According to this data from the U.S. National Labor Committee, some Chinese workers make as little as 12 to 18 cents per hour. Additionally, manufactured fabrics like polyester are derived from petroleum, and their production is intensive and requires large amounts of crude oil. Not only that, but the production of said fabric and chemicals for treatment are activators of respiratory disease and impact factory workers. The sheer volume of cheap, low-quality clothing produced overwhelms domestic donation and recycling systems. This discarded clothing is often bundled and exported to developing nations who have loose anti-dumping laws, such as Ghana and Chile. The result is a massive pollution of second-hand countries. According to lawyer and activist B.C. Ogunmefun, 40 to 60% of imported second-hand clothes in Ghana end up as immediate waste. This dumping has created disasters, such as the Great Fashion Garbage Patch in Chile's Atacama Desert. This is next to a city, and this synthetic waste is likely not biodegradable and will impact Chilean landscape for generations to come. The fast fashion business model, built on speed and low costs, directly creates a system of exploitation for garment workers. As many of us know, laborers endure poor wages, dangerous working conditions, and severe negative health outcomes. Workers are subject to extensive working hours and forced to work under the threat of losing salary. Factory disasters are common due to unsafe conditions. For example, the 2012 Tazreen fashion fire and the 2013 Rana Plaza collapse, which killed 1,134 people. In Gemma Nazarali's report, she provides evidence that workers are often facing chronic illness due to poor ventilation and long-term diseases from chemical exposure. Nazarali cites that prior to entering the garment industry, 54% of surveyed Bangladeshi garment workers reported healthy lifestyles. However, this was reduced to 12% after entering the industry. Systemic solutions are required to confront the ideology of endless consumption. Instead of focusing on individual behavior changes, we can direct our attention towards policies of degrowth and sufficiency. Strategies include work time reduction, which is associated with lower consumption pressures. If we were to spend more time interacting with our community, our friends, and not working, we would likely build a better sense of self and would not need to fill a void with purchasing items. This necessity for change stems from the critique that overconsumption is an ideology sustained by the growth-oriented capitalist economy. Stewart, author of Overconsumption as an Ideology, posits that to perpetuate production and generate wealth for the elite, manufactured false needs must keep us spending. However, it is not without note that the economic model has provided some benefits such as job creation in countries like Bangladesh, but also making goods that were once reserved for elites affordable to the common. This current environmental structure externalizes environmental costs through the export of cheap, low-quality clothing, resulting in duty-free dumping onto the global south. This means they can dump with very little repercussions and very little cost. Attempts by nations like Rwanda to ban these imports were met with threats of losing AGOA, African Growth and Opportunity Act, trade benefits from the U.S. This clearly demonstrates the power dynamic involved in outsourcing the waste. The current anti-dumping regime under the World Trade Organization is ill-equipped to deal with the crisis as it requires importing countries to prove material injury to a domestic industry. This means they must prove substantial harm, and it requires a causal link between imports and the injury. This is a narrow economic standard that ignores environmental harm. It requires that for them to prevent dumping from in their country, they must prove that it is harming their economic structure, not necessarily the ecological structure. Therefore, lawyer and activist Algon Muffin proposes amending WTO laws to classify environmental harm caused by textile waste as a form of material injury. This would provide developing countries the legal grounds to reject waste-heavy shipments and shifting penalties to exporting corporations. Additionally, if manufacturers were required to be transparent about their supply chain, it could reduce waste generation and requires due diligence in slowing down the manufacturing process. Ultimately, countering the ideology of overconsumption means confronting the cultural belief that upholds resource depletion. A reduction in overconsumption requires turning fast fashion into a shameful and dishonorable practice. We must understand that corporate sustainability efforts are often just greenwashing designed to alleviate consumer shame rather than solving the actual problem. The only path forward is to shift identity affirmation away from consumption to things such as community projects, sports, and investing in our creative arts. By prioritizing structural change, building empathy for others and the planet, and adopting policies that regulate marketing, we can shift away from mere de-influencing, buying less, towards promoting sustainable living. Collective action is a necessity. Through a common goal, we can share accountability. We have power and voice in numbers. Thank you.